Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. We're going to wait for a few minutes to let people join. We've got a lot of people joining, it looks like there's still people joining, so we will wait for a few minutes. In the meantime, please do introduce yourself in the chat. It'll really be great if you could say who you are, where you come from. That would be great. You'll see that along the bottom of your screen there's also a questions tab. If you want questions addressed while we're speaking or in the certain points, or even if you have questions right now, you're welcome to drop them there into the question tab as well. And we have a few polls that we are launching along the way. I think there are already a few that are available for you to go to. So as we're waiting, there's a few things that you can do, and a very warm welcome to you. And we'll get started in maybe 3 minutes or so. Fantastic to see you all. I'm just going to say another warm welcome, just so that you don't wonder whether your sound is working. We're just waiting a few minutes until a few more people have joined. We've still got a number signing in at the moment. In the meantime, please do introduce yourself in the chat. If you have questions, burning questions already, you can put them into the question tab. And I think there are also a few polls available that you can go in and address. So yeah, great to see you all. A warm welcome. Oh, I'm not going to do justice to your name, Soundaraya. I hope that's something matching your name from Development Alternatives Group. It's really great to see you here. Warm welcome to you. We also, I can see a number of names here. Marcus, great to see you. Thank you for joining in here. From our team, Remus is also on the line. Lisa from Micronesia Conservation Trust. Fantastic that you can join us. Huge congratulations on the approval of your project. Margarita, great to see you. Welcome, joining us from Canada today. Thank you. Warm welcome to you. Let's see, Clara from IIED, welcome. Good to see you here. Just calling out a few names that I see on the first part of my screen. Yeah, locally led adaptation focus, Clara. Yeah, it's I know it's an area that IIED have got a particular knowledge and skill in, and participating in some of the fora that are discussing this. Welcome to you. Marianne, welcome. Great to see you here. You're very generous about my pronunciation. Thank you very much. Hello, Colin from UNIDO, our friends at UNIDO. Great to see you here. Right, I think we're almost ready to go. I think a few people are still joining. Yeah, someone's just joined right now, but I think we can get moving soon. Caroline, great to see you from FSM. Wonderful that you can join us, and congratulations on your project as well. Great. Let me just check in with my team. Shall we get going? Get started. Really looking forward to this session. We are talking today about the 36th board meeting of the GCF, and we also have a presentation, sort of an unpacking of our GCF Insight publication. Believe it or not, it's the 23rd issue of GCF Insight. My company ECO is 23 years old. We haven't been doing it every year. We've done multiple issues of it, but it's our 23rd issue of GCF Insight. We're going to give you a short introduction and unpacking of that. You're very welcome to download that. It's really a great pleasure to welcome you all here today. And I have three colleagues here, Mariella de Souza-Baker, Paula Guillaumet, and Margaret-Ann Splawn. It's great to have all of you as speakers here. Please do participate in our discussions. You can post comments. Some of you have already posted them, and it's great to see those. There is a little tab at the bottom next to the word chat called questions. If you click on that, you can put in questions there. And the great benefit of putting it into there is that then you can upvote questions. If you find those interesting as well, you can add to them as well. Very briefly on myself. Oh yeah, polls. Let me mention polls since that slide has come up now. We're going to have a number of polls. If you click on the polls tab, which is next to the one called questions, then you can answer those polls. There are currently 4 available at the moment, I think, and submit your vote. Some of them are just background, but some of them we'll also discuss and refer to in the presentations. There's a very interesting dynamic at the GCF around small projects benefiting very vulnerable people versus larger projects that perhaps have a bigger and wider impact. This is one of the interesting discussions that I think we will probably cover today. This webinar is hosted by ECO. ECO is a consulting company. We work in climate finance and development throughout the world. I think we've worked in more than 150 countries. We're specialized in low carbon, climate resilient development and the design of projects and programs. Very specialized in that sort of area. It's been a very exciting year for us. We are having internal developments as we grow as a company. These are great to see. We have new clients that we haven't worked with before this year. One of the real highlights of this you're going to hear more about today is 2 of projects that we've been working on for our dear and valued clients were approved at the board meeting at this B.36 meeting, the Micronesia Conservation Trust and Green Project. And these are the 2 opposite ends of that spectrum. So it's been an exciting year. So we're going to start with a presentation where Mariella will be discussing GCF Insight. I'll be unpacking the GCF board meeting that just took place with Paula and Margaret-Ann. And we'll try and answer questions as we go. If you have them, we'll give you some time as well so that you can concentrate on the presentations as well as ask your questions. So presentation first is from Mariella de Souza-Baker. She is the head of marketing at ECO. She's worked in communications and media for over 10 years, specifically on strategic campaigns and such like. But recently, Mariella has been making her presence felt even more in the technical areas of our work. She contributes to many of our assignments, is doing some studies related to it, has been in our podcast called The Echo Chamber. If you haven't caught those, there are 2 episodes of The Echo Chamber talking about gender, specifically within the context of climate finance. I highly recommend those, well worth listening. And she produced this latest GCF Insight. Mariella, welcome on stage. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Hi, Grant, and hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. So I'm going to do the presentation just on GCF Insight. I hope that many of you will have read it, and if you haven't, we'll send it to you after this webinar. So what we looked at in this edition, so as Grant said, our 23rd edition, we looked at climate change adaptation in GCF project development. So why adaptation? So adaptation and the resilience building measures it creates, it's crucial to combating climate change. If you'd seen our last quarter, we speak a lot about the different areas of adaptation and all of the different experts in our team, looking at cities, looking at locally led adaptation, and especially the financing gap, which we'll talk about in this study. So it enables effective communities to increase resilience, and adaptation typically receives a lot less attention and funding than mitigation. In terms of finance, so adaptation finance, described as finance for actions that help communities reduce the risks they face and the harm they might suffer from climate hazards. Of the 653 billion in global climate finance, only 49 billion went to adaptation, according to Climate Policy Initiative. And the estimated adaptation finance needed by 2030 is between 160 and 340 billion dollars annually, and 565 by 2050. So in terms of the GCF, they're the only climate fund with an explicit mandate to deliver that equal split of funding to adaptation and mitigation. Yet 40% of the committed funding at the moment, so that's 4.8 billion, is currently for adaptation. This was prior to B.36. And 89 of the 216 projects at the moment are adaptation, 72 mitigation, 55 cross-cutting. And 35% of adaptation comes from the private sector, and that's only 6 projects out of 89. So in terms of GCF Insight and our study, so this was conducted by some of our team. So Marcus, who you might have remembered, he was presenting this regularly, he conducted this study and is on the webinar today, so thanks, Marcus. So the methodology, it was carried out in June. We sent a survey, some of you might have contributed to that, and it was semi-structured interviews as well to supplement. 61 of you responded, and we had 3 interviews. And the objective was to identify the challenges and barriers to successfully designing adaptation projects for GCF. So here are 3 things that we found. So 1, the difficulties in creating convincing investment arguments for adaptation is a huge contributor to the funding gap between mitigation and adaptation. There's a lack of clear revenue generating potential for adaptation projects, making them less attractive, especially to the private sector. So the question of what's the ROI, that's at the center of it, whether you're going to invest in adaptation projects. And thirdly, the innovative final instruments combined with capacity building could really positively influence adaptation investments. So we asked, so what are the barriers to effective adaptation? And our respondents, 66% of them cited the limited financial resources. 57% said knowledge gaps and the lack of climate change understanding. 57 noted information gaps, so there's a lack of data as well, which is a really crucial aspect. 45% pointed to the limited political buy-in and support, and 43% think there are unclear legal or regulatory frameworks. So we determined that it creates an interesting chicken versus egg question. So are there limited financial resources because of the fewer bankable projects, or fewer bankable projects because of the limited financial resources? So if you've got any thoughts, please feel free to write that in the chat. And we asked the question, why is there a funding gap between adaptation and mitigation? So our answers were there's a lack of revenue generation for adaptation projects, making them less attractive. It makes it challenging, as I mentioned, to calculate economic benefits such as ROI, so the return on investment. And thirdly, indicators for adaptation are less developed and more ambiguous. So it makes a methodology for calculating the impact a bit more challenging. And how many tons of carbon dioxide are reduced, how much is removed, it's far clearer than enhanced resilience. Next, we looked at locally led adaptation in GCF projects and program design. So a lot of our respondents focused on the need to move away from the top-down approach that's currently in place, and a bottom-up approach must be more widely adopted, ensuring local communities are involved at the very start, and projects are designed in a really community-driven approach to really feel that ownership and buy-in and participation. One key strategy is to draw on local level knowledge, which I think is a huge conversation, and we wrote a lot about that this quarter. And it's not just addressing the scientific considerations, but having a clear understanding of socio-cultural and economic context. And I think if anyone is interested in conversations around climate justice and Mary Robinson Foundation, that moving climate conversations away from melting ice caps of greenhouse gas emissions to making it more of a, she says, civil rights movement, focusing more on people and how it affects in context is a really interesting aspect. And would be interested to hear your thoughts as well if any of you are interested in discussing climate justice. Next, we looked at making adaptation investments more attractive. So our respondents, they really stressed the value of utilising a range of financial instruments available. So some of the answers, we said high concessionary loans to upscale initiatives, since they've got a lower environmental risk. Then concessionary loans, so either at an interest rate below the standard market levels or through other options such as deferred repayments. And they help mobilise funding at scale, making the terms much more attractive. Could also explore new instruments such as debt for nature, debt for climate swaps. And there are so many more things that we can add to this conversation. Paula and Margaret-Ann and Grant are going to cover this. And if you're really interested to read the report, we'll send it out afterwards and we'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mariella. Much appreciated. Yeah, so many interesting points that Mariella briefly covered, and we're happy to talk more detail about those, going to speak about them. There's definitely the locally led adaptation area that has been mentioned already before, which Clara IID and you are particularly interested in there, and GCF's new focus around that, what it actually means. So these are all important issues to talk about and to discuss. We're going to push on with the presentation around the 36th board meeting of the GCF, and then we will circle back. We'll have time for questions and answers. And just, I might not have mentioned it already, but we will be sharing with you the recording and everyone that signed up, the recording of this, so that you can listen to it again. You can dig into the little bits that you might have missed or anything like that. You'll get a copy of the slide deck, answers to questions, and the recording as well. Right, so Paula is a valued member of our team. She's a consultant here at ECO and has been working for the last 6 years on sustainable policies and programs. This includes greenhouse gas accounting, design and development of low carbon climate resilient projects in both the public sphere and the private sphere. She's based in Barcelona, and her background is in architecture, energy and sustainability, an area I think that's really encompasses a lot of what you're interested in, Paula, isn't it, is the area of urban development. But Paula's expertise extends a lot further than that into elements of quantitative analysis, mathematical modeling, low carbon development pathways, and mainstreaming resilience in urban development. So Paula's going to be speaking to us. She attended the board meeting and will give us some first-hand insights into what happened there. We're also very pleased to have the participation of Margaret-Ann Splawn. She's Executive Director of the CMIA, which is the Climate Markets and Investment Association. ECO has been very privileged to be a member of the CMIA. It's an independent, not-for-profit organization that provides leadership from the private sector in this particular area of climate investment policies and mechanisms. And there are 2 active private sector observers at the GCF, and Margaret-Ann is one of them. So she really gets the inside track on on what happens at the board meetings and attends them, and participates and has the discussions in the halls with people from the GCF and all of the various stakeholders that are interested. So we're now going to move into a short presentation. Paula's going to lead us in, which we've called B.36 Unpacked. Paula, over to you.
Hi, everyone, and hi, Grant. Well, I will lead you through this process of unpacking what happened in the board meeting in Songdo. It happened like 2 weeks ago, so it's quite fresh still, and we had some time to land a bit what happened in that moment. And well, the content that we will cover is the GCF Strategic Plan. This is an update from the one on 2020 to 2023. So it will tell which are the main priorities and goals of the GCF during this period of time. Then we're going to discuss the accredited entities, both the ones that were re-accredited and the ones that were looking for their first accreditation. There were 12 projects approved in this round. We consider that that's a very successful round because in the previous one, there were only 7. The amount that was provided by the GCF to this project adds up to $750 million. And then after that, we're going to talk about the second replenishment that is ongoing. That is the way the Green Climate Fund gets funds from different governments that donate this money for the activities of the Green Climate Fund. And then we're going to talk a bit about the progress and which are the numbers, how the GCF has been moving forward during these years and which are the results that have been achieved. Well, starting with the GCF Strategic Plan 2024-2027, it is very much in line with the previous one with just a few changes. For example, we encourage, or we're very happy to see that they went for putting some numbers on their activities and engaging in some goals. Of course, that the goals are attached to the projects that are presented to the fund and are funded. So, well, they're committing or aiming for mitigation of 1.5 to 2.4 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. What does this mean in numbers? It's like 1,500 million tons of CO2. And well, regarding enhanced resilience, they're going for 570 to 900 million people. What does it means in practical terms? For example, which is the impact of the board meeting that we saw 2 weeks ago? The mitigation footprint of that board was 382 million tons and 108 million beneficiaries. That means that for reaching this goal, they will need between 5 and 6 rounds with the same mitigation impact, and between 5 and 9 rounds with the adaptation impact. With this, we can try to measure how to say, ambitious these goals are. So if we compare those goals with this board meeting that we saw on the last weeks, it will be that may look like it is achievable, that it actually can happen. Between 2024 and 2027, we will see 12 different board meetings because there are 3 per year in 4 years. So as the number of boards required will be less than that, we can say that it's achievable. But we should not forget that these impacts that were seen on the board meeting are driven by the projects that were presented. And there was a particularity that were 2 very big projects during this round. For example, the Green Initiative covers 90% of the mitigation impact of the board meeting, of the projects approved in the board meeting. And the project Hardest to Reach, presented by Acumen, covers 50% of the adaptation impact on this round. So, which means that this success or not success, or achievable or not achievable goals are attached to individual projects sometimes that have a certain scale and have a huge impact on how it develops. If we see the numbers from the previous round, only 7 projects were presented. The mitigation impact was 100 million tons of CO2, and the adaptation impact was 246 beneficiaries. That means that the mitigation impact was a third, but then the adaptation impact was 2.5 times the one we saw in this round. That means that the mitigation impact will have to take more rounds to reach their goal. And the adaptation impact is that between 3 and 5 rounds of like the one we saw in B.35 will be enough to cover these goals that they're setting. So it's up to you to judge if these different goals that they're setting are ambitious or not. I think that they are achievable, but it will depend a lot on which projects are in the pipeline to move forward. The other change that we saw is that there is a strong focus in adaptation. Well, this is in line with Mariella presented in GCF Insight. They are trying to balance this 50-50, and right now the balance is more or less 48, sorry. So they are still pushing a bit more for adaptation. And there is a will to increase the share of the private sector facility in comparison with the GCF one, so the previous replenishment. In this, their committing is to try to engage a wider finance ecosystem. So they are testing some initiatives like models that usually are used by incubators or accelerators to mainstream climate technologies. Feel free to add anything if you feel like Margaret-Ann. I will then continue with the next slide. Regarding accredited entities, there is a strong focus in going for more direct access entities. This means the entities that have a national or regional focus. In this round, we saw 4 seeking for re-accreditation, that are the West African Development Bank, Corporación Andina de Fomento, and Fundación Avina, both of them from Latin America. And my French is not that good, but it's the agency of the French Agency of Development as an international entity. In new accreditations, we see a similar distribution with 3 direct access entities and 1 international entity. Why it is important? This is because the way that GCF operates is through accredited entities. So the only way of presenting a funding proposal is being an accredited entity or getting the support of one. We have been analyzing which are among the different accredited entities, which ones have like projects approved. And we surprisingly found that 65 accredited entities have not yet approved projects, so they haven't reached through the whole process from accreditation of the agency to getting funds on a project that they present. And this is a bit alarming because we don't know if this is due to the fund being new or this accredited being new, so not in the maturity level to actually get the projects approved, or if there is some difficulty on the process to reach this goal of getting projects approved and funds from the GCF. Among these 65 accredited entities that have no projects approved yet, there are 47 that are direct access entities. Most of them are from medium, small, or micro size, so it may be that we see a change on the trends in the future, but at the moment it seems that these direct asset entities are not reaching the goals that the Green Climate Fund is setting for achieving projects to these agencies. Moving forward, we're going to talk about project approvals that us as consultants are very happy about, because we had two projects that we were supporting approved in this round. That is the Micronesia Conservation Trust project with the community, ecosystem-based adaptation in Palau, Marshall Islands, and Micronesia, and the initiative of Ungreen. That it is agriculture, inclusive agriculture and conservation of forestry. Well, in this round there were 12 projects approved, which means that the GCF distributed $750 million among these 12 projects, and the total investment was of $3,174 million. The proportion that there is between the investment activity to the GCF and the total investment is around 3.5. And well, in this round, we saw 4 simplified approval process and 8 traditional funding proposals. What is this simplified approval processes? The GCF is trying to make the process simpler for direct asset entities to access the funds. So this particular mechanism has a limit on 25 million that can be requested from the GCF. And the second constraint is that the environmental and social risks should be minimal to none. That's why not all projects fit on this category, but the ones that fit are supposed to have a simpler and shorter process and forms and information that is required from them. There is also a goal from the GCF on that the 50% of the simplified approval access, simplified approval process, sorry, too many acronyms, should be presented by direct access entities. This percentage is still not met because, as you can see, in this round we saw only 3 direct access entities presenting projects and 7 international ones. In the quantity of projects, it will be 4 direct access entities against 8 from international, so it's more or less a 30% that was presented by these agencies. And well, there is also a distribution between 8 public funded projects, well, public sector projects against 4 from the private. And in this round, we didn't see any mitigation projects in line with what the GCF is trying to prioritize. So there is an interesting matching between the public sector and adaptation projects and private sector and cross-cutting. Private sector is known for usually mainstreaming mitigation projects because it's easier for them to meet the financial returns that as private sector requires. And in the moment, everyone is trying to find the adaptation side of each of the initiatives to try to follow the trends that of funding that the GCF is pushing forward. Let me see what I'm missing. It's a very busy slide. There is one project, the Micronesian Conservation Trust project, that went through the window of an indirect access. This is a new pilot that the GCF is testing, and it has 200 million that has been attributed to this pilot. This is the 3rd project that we see of this kind. The previous one where there was one in the Caribbean with Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, and Grenada, and one in Namibia. Usually these projects are community-based or of small scale. What it warranties this new mechanism is that the sub-projects that are inside of the project don't have to go through GCF approval, but the accredited entity needs to disclose which is the decision-making body and some details on how the decision and the criteria is going to be used, which criteria is going to be used for selecting the sub-projects. On geographical focus, well, there was a lot of talk among the different board members on which areas were more or less represented. In this case, the African states got 48% of the funds provided by GCF. We should remind that this all the African states are considered priority countries. Well, then Asian Pacific got 22%, Latin America and the Caribbean 5%, and then there is a global project that is a green project that, as we don't know exactly how the funds are going to be distributed, we listed it as global, but it includes both countries from Latin America, Africa, and also Asia and Pacific. So in this case, we can see that as the priority countries listed by the GCF are aligned with the countries that receive funds in the different funding proposals. And well, there are just a few that are not included inside that category. Okay, next, we're gonna talk about some of these projects. We know them very well, these ones, because we have been supporting them, but that's not the only reason why we are, well, explaining them today. This project has been cataloged inside like the corridors of the GCF as a unicorn, and we are very proud of that because we think that it's an awesome initiative. And in this case, well, there are many elements that make this project like reach a sweet spot for the GCF because it shows many of the things that they have been trying to promote over the years. Well, first is an AIMS direct access project that is a pilot that they are testing, so it's good that they get some projects through that pipeline. It is also a simplified approval process, this mechanism that I was explaining before, that has this limit of funds and how the social and environmental impact should be, well, impact risk should be. This project is an ecosystem-based adaptation project that will provide it's not microcredit the right word, but funds that are accessible for different entities and individuals in the islands. And it is built on top of previous initiatives. There is this initiative that is called Micronesia Challenge that covers these 3 states that are part of the project. And there are also some initiatives from Adaptation Fund or Global Environmental Facility in this area that cover the food value chain and access to, mainstream resilience in coastal areas in these regions. This project also aligns clearly with the different national priorities, both from Micronesia, Palau, and Marshall Islands. Their national documents state, for example, in Micronesia, priority areas, protected areas management as one of the priorities. In Palau, build resilience in agriculture and fishery sectors. And in Marshall Islands, ecosystem management, protection, and conservation are listed as priority focus areas. The total budget of this project is $94 million US, and it has a component of 8.9 million as a grant, which means that it's mostly based on a grant from the GCF. And well, as the main priority of the GCF is to get a shift on the way that things are done, I believe that this project is can prove how has a significant impact on the population, because if we can list the beneficiaries of this project, there are 34,000 direct beneficiaries and 42,000 indirect beneficiaries. What means that is around like 76,000 beneficiaries, and the total population of these 3 states is 173,000. That means that 44% of the population will be impacted by this project. It may not seem big on the scale at a global level, but for this region, it's very important to have this support from the GCF. It also has some components that are encouraged by the GCF, like have projects that are community managed, to integrate gender into the proposal, to work with vulnerable people, and to base the initiative on indigenous knowledge. So this project is one that actually checks all the boxes for the GCF. That's why it received a lot of support, for example, from the CSOs, that are the civil society observers at the board meeting. And we consider that this a very good example on how adaptation can be assessed through an ecosystem-based approach and community management. We are all gonna now introduce another project that is almost at the extreme opposite regarding size and scope. That is the Ungreen Initiative. This project is working with supporting commodity supply chains in areas that require protection of the ecosystems. So their model here is trying to go for agriculture intensification instead of expansion. So in this way, the production of the areas that are already occupied by agriculture use will increase their production, so they will not have to increase the pressure over forests that are in the area. Well, probably it's much more complex than that, but that's the way I'm gonna try to explain it in this moment. Let me see. The budget of this project is 10x the total of the previous project. So the previous one was going for had a budget of 9.9 million, and this one has 981 million US dollars as total budget. But if we can see the grant that both are requesting, this one is 9.4 million, and the previous one was 8.9 million. So regarding grant, they are in a similar scale, but this project also requests a loan of 180 million. What we can see usually with projects that belong to the public or private sphere is that they request funds in different ways. Usually the public spheres goes more for grants. I think that, if I'm not wrong, 50% of the money that it is requested by public sector is on grants, and it is followed by loans, while the private sector mostly requires loans in a more or less similar amount as 50% loans, followed by equity that it has a weight of more or less 30%. So it is a different approach to how they request money from this entity. I don't know if Margaret-Ann is around. We know that this project received some critics regarding, involving the private sector, but we would like to discuss why it is important to include also the private sector in this climate action. I don't know. Oh, hi, Grant. I can see you, but I can't see Margaret-Ann.
Hopefully this is
okay.
I hope it's working there.
Hi.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I mean, for me, I don't know if Grant, you wanted to say something first about this, but I think really what to us is this program is transformational because it's working across these tropical forest landscapes, supporting this these agri-commodity businesses with capital, expertise, and partnerships to help build climate resilient, deforestation-free, and socially inclusive business models of, providing private sector investors with commercially profitable investment blueprints that are designed to align with local and global sustainability objectives and really determined to go beyond what is required by currently established regulation. Grant, I'm not sure if you've got a specific thing that you wanted to highlight about the commodity players or GCF investment within this.
No, I was going to talk a little bit about the controversy because this is a big project with big impacts in terms of numbers. I think, Paula, you said 90% of the mitigation reductions come from this project. It's massive. It's a cross-cutting one, of course, compared to the Micronesia Conservation Trust project. And I think I mentioned right at the beginning, it's absolutely fantastic, Lisa, that you've joined this call, and also Caroline from the NDA in Micronesia. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you to help, a little bit of help to get that project across the line. So these are just two very contrasting projects.
Well, this one also represents 25% of the funding here.
Of the funding, yeah.
Yeah, of the funding on this at B.36. However, I think one of the interesting things, Grant, is that what do we need? We know we need small island developing states, but we also need to transform it at a large scale. So one of the great questions that you guys have is what is the purpose of the GCF? Is it one or the other? Is it both? And I think this is something that we should certainly look to unpack.
Yeah, and how do you navigate that? I can't speak for the CSO views, but just what I heard from the board meeting was one comment that the Micronesia project was a perfect model. The Micronesia Conservation Trust project, perfect model. And I can't remember the exact words, but they were very, very critical about the large private sector participation in this and green project, saying GCF money shouldn't be spent on this. These companies should do it anyway. They're big, wealthy companies.
Yeah, well, you would say that, but commodity, players do act on thinner margins. And the And Green Fund was established in 2017, but this money will be able to allow it to go further, faster, and into countries where it's currently not operating. So I really think there is the call for, if what the GCF is only going to do is small projects, that's fine. However, how are we going to look to transform larger scale projects such as these? So civil society was unhappy about this. However, this is the first large commodity transformational program at the GCF, and the GCF is designed to be innovative and to go where they haven't been able to before. I think one of the interesting things about this is this came through FMO, which I can't pronounce. The Dutch Entrepreneurial Development Bank. The name is very, very long. You've got it here on the screen. But FMO, this now that this is approved, this makes their fourth program approved by the GCF. They've got a long history of, they know what they're doing. The other two projects are working with climate, called Climate Fund Manager, and they've got Climate Investment Fund 1 and Climate Investment Fund 2. They've got a third one, which is the Green Growth Equity Fund, which through the executing entity Eversource Capital, and this one is through executing entity of Sale Ventures. So really, I think this is a great example of taking public sector money and blending it with private sector capital in order to go at things at scale. And this is exactly what FMO is doing. So I think there's definitely the case for, while we absolutely need Micronesia, we also need to transform on a large scale. And this is one of the possibility ways of doing that. But Grant, maybe you've got a different view.
Yeah, personal view, it's all about balance, I guess. We've got to bring transformation into the whole of society, and even sometimes that for some people might mean that you're working with people that you're not, you don't see 100% eye to eye. I'm not saying within anything with Ant Green. I mean, what a great group of really passionate people wanting to bring about transformation. It's of our society. I think was it the French board member, I can't exactly remember, who just commented, wow, these impacts, are you absolutely sure these were the right, these are calculated properly? We are sure. We were involved in supporting the work on the calculations, and they're very conservative. It's going to have a massive impact.
See, this is exactly the point, though, is that we've got to go at, how do we go at pace and at scale without looking at larger projects such as these? So, I would argue that there's room for both. It's not an either or, it's an and. And so I think we're in this, this was 2 years in the making to put this together. I mean, And Green existed in 2017, and now how do you take it further? I think with this money from the GCF, is they'll actually be able to take this further. What's great is that FMO is, they know what they're doing. There's a lot of hoops to jump through in order for the executing entity to do this. But I definitely take your point. One of the things we didn't mention, and I know we're not going through all of the different projects, but if you look at even an accredited entity like Acumen, which brought in two projects here, FP210 and FP211. So one is the Kawasaki 2 fund, which follows on the Kawasaki 1 fund. And Acumen was one of the very first private sector projects approved back in 2016. And I really think it's interesting to not just look at what they did. They approved this back in 2016. They've since raised 2 further funds, and they are deploying capital and getting out capital in such a way that is very encouraging. They've got, what is it? They've got, in fact, they're deploying on target with 2 of them almost nearing the end of deployment and 1 fully being deployed. And why I point this out is that it's one of the many issues facing these funds that are at the GCF is the deployment of capital fast enough. And this is not the case with Acumen, as they're really on track for impact on all 3 projects. So then these next 2, that's going to bring them to a total of 5, these next 2, funds that they have, which is one Kawasaki 2, and then also the hardest to reach, which again is a cross-cutting project out of 16 countries in Africa, really with LDCs. So really pushing the boundaries as to what the private sector could do, not just in mitigation but in adaptation. So I think those 2 are definitely worth mentioning or looking at, even though they're very different, obviously, from the Anne Green project that you all worked on.
I think I can take forward. It is a wonderful discussion. I'm very happy that we can discuss this and we can contrast different projects that are presented, both great initiatives. I was wondering if the audience wants to share with us their opinion on this, which is the main focus that the GCF should have on investment. We are going to release this poll. You can answer so we can get a view of which are your thoughts on this discussion. Well, we already expressed our opinion. We are happy with contributing technically in both of them. We consider that they are great. What's that? I don't know if we can see the results of the poll. Well, we do have a bit of space for questions and answers. If I can see that there are some questions that have been already released. There is some questions on direct entity access. Okay, just a moment. If there is a risk of direct access and not searching for accreditation in the future because of not getting GCF projects approved. Would you like to take that one, Grant?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any amazing answer that is there. The question is, with some DAEs failing to get through, does this risk that they won't get re-accredited in the future? When we've worked with direct access entities, we have and the re-accreditation process. Definitely that's part of it. Track record. Have you managed to mobilize projects? But I sense that GCF are going to be quite understanding on this element. I mean, Paula's statistics are a little bit mind-blowing. I didn't realize it was such a big thing of so many accredited entities that have never submitted a project, and the vast proportion of them are direct access entities. That, I mean, it's so difficult to get accredited. So there's a long process to get accredited, and then you're finally accredited, and then there's a real struggle. Maybe that you get to the top of the mountain and notice that you're still in the plains, and there's another mountain ahead to get projects approved.
I think that's a really good point that you have, Grant, and particularly when you consider the GCF's new accreditation strategy is to increase more DAE, and from a private sector perspective, more DAEs or private sector DAEs which require obviously the support from the National Designated Authority to even become an AE. It's really going to be more and more difficult, and Clara's question is very relevant to. They might be in the pipeline because, as you know, just because you become accredited, you've obviously got this work plan. If for those that don't know, there is a work plan of which you're presenting, and that can take a year or 2 years before you actually are presenting your proposal to the GCF board. So it is I can see that this is going to be a bit harder or a bit trickier if things are not simplified, and it doesn't quite feel like they are from word on the ground with people at GCF B.36 who were there becoming re-accredited.
Yeah.
I have a comment regarding one of the agencies that got re-accredited, that is Fundación Avina. It is a micro-scale accredited agency in Latin America. Quite small. I worked with them in the past. And I saw their file on how they wanted to get reaccredited. That they don't have projects approved doesn't mean that they are inactive. They did have readiness, they did have PPF. There are many windows that you can get access. But of course, that those windows, like country program and PPF readiness, are aiming for accredited entities to reach the stage of funding proposal. So it seems that they have some things in the pipeline, but sometimes it's very hard for them, sometimes as small agencies, to reach the stage, and it takes a long time for them to reach getting funds from the GCF on specific proposals.
If I can add one thing to that, it's not just a long time, it's also resources and money. We often forget that. It's not just the time, it's the resources and money that is required. I think people underestimate exactly the accreditation process, and then as well the project preparation, the costs involved in terms of manpower, knowledge, capacity, etc. But Grant and Paula, you guys are on the ground working with people directly, so you're probably able to say more around this.
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, we need to close this question and just draw things to a close. We did the poll. I don't know if there's a way for me to display the results, but 63% of people have chosen maximize the mitigation adaptation impact. 33%, so well, 2/3 to impact, 1/3 to reaching the most vulnerable, and just a very small, actually one person voted for protect natural resources and ecosystems. So that's interesting. Maximize mitigation impact. I guess it's this balance. I mean, isn't it? 2/3, 1/3. It's both. We forced everyone to make a choice, but yes, there isn't a choice between these two, is there?
Yeah, I guess that the curious thing is that the GCF mission is regarding the impact on mitigation and adaptation. And then there are other entities, for example, the World Bank, that will work with sharing prosperity and with extreme poverty, or for example, the one on natural resources. There are entities like the Union for Conservation of Nature that are targeting those areas. So we just wanted to highlight that the GCF is very much inclined for climate change mitigation and adaptation, because that's the main objective of the fund. It's not the only one. They also work with vulnerable people. Like, they want to include vulnerable people, they want to mainstream gender in their projects. There are many different goals that the GCF has, but as a fund, it should have a climate rationale that justify the project to request those funds.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, our time's up. Just a huge thank you to everyone that participated. We really appreciate it. We will be sending this webinar replay kit to you and to the email that you registered on, so you keep an eye out for that. If you don't see it in the next week or two, please do check spam filters and such like. You can always contact us. My email is there on the screen, grant@ecoltdgroup.com, and Paula's email is there. So please do get in touch and follow us on various social media. Huge thank you for participating. Really appreciate that. Thank you to Mariella. Mariella has been juggling so many different things, running the webinar as well as presenting today. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Margaret-Ann. Always lovely to have you on the call. You add so much value and interesting thoughts and insights from your side. And Paula, fantastic presentation, really appreciate it. I hope all of you have found it as useful as I have. Really great to meet with you. Looking forward to seeing you again in the future. Please do follow us and get in touch. Really appreciate it. Thank you. So we'll keep things on for a little bit on the chat. So you're welcome to still put some things in chat, and then we'll close the webinar shortly. Thanks so much for participating. Really appreciate it.